waiting for, Mr. Richard Peary.
Thanks for that introduction. It's such a great honor. I'm glad I could finally get here to participate in this tribute to Congressman Stokes, because I can't think of anything that is more deserved than our coming out to honor the congressman. There's an old saying that heroes are unsung at home, and that we don't know how great people are when we're close to them. I think that throughout Congressman Stokes' career, that has largely been true. I think that throughout the country and throughout the world, he probably got the least recognition right here where he did the most. And I'm glad to see that finally that is changing. I was fortunate in the 1980s. I had a position that caused me to go to Washington frequently. And while I was there, I made a point of getting on Capitol Hill, meeting some staff people and some other congressmen, and what I sensed was that Congressman Stokes was probably the most highly respected man in Washington, D.C., something that we did not. I had that brought home to me once when I went to I think it's still the 21st District Caucus meeting. Congressman Stokes spoke, and as I was walking out, I happened to be walking next to a young man. I introduced myself. He was a doctor from Ghana. He said to me, when I go back to Morehouse Medical College, from which I just graduated, and say that I shook hands with Congressman Stokes, I'll be the biggest man on campus. That is what this African who studied in Atlanta, his greatest thrill was to come to Cleveland and meet Congressman Stokes, and while we have taken him for granted all these years. And of course, we're all aware of the humble beginnings of Congressman Stokes and his brother in the projects and a single parent home, and we don't have to go into that. But what we really need to tell the young people about is how the Stokes brothers did not allow that humble beginning put a ceiling on what they were going to do. They both went to law school. We know about Carl, of course, and Congressman Stokes, something that's forgotten by many people. Before he went to Congress, he was one of the nation's outstanding constitutional lawyers. He argued cases before the United States Supreme Court that law students today have to study and have to master Congressman Stokes' arguments just in order to get their law degrees. And that was before he ever went to Congress. And when I look around, I don't mean to be political or critical, but I look around today, I think there's something else about Congressman Stokes that even before he went to Congress, that so many people seem to have forgotten today. He was a volunteer lawyer for the NAACP. You knew in the 1960s when he was on the Legal Redress Committee that if you had a problem of racial discrimination, you could go to the NAACP and you would be treated with the kind of seriousness that your complaint demanded. And I think that since Congressman Stokes left the Legal Redress Committee, we have not been able to rebuild that kind of haven for the victims of our community. And I think that when I think back on those days, I certainly appreciate him even more. Of course, after he was elected to Congress, he set an outstanding record that few people in Cleveland appreciate. He was one of the founders of the Congressional Black Caucus. As an early chairman, he was the architect of turning the caucus into the nation's most powerful voice for progressive social policy, probably in the United States history. And that came about because of Congressman Stokes' vision for what the caucus ought to become. And so now, for the last, I don't know how many years, 15 years, they've been presenting their own budget analysis, their own roadmap for the direction in which the country ought to be going. And while it hasn't always been followed, it at least has been like a beacon out there to let us know what should be done, let us know what we have to work toward. And I think that more than any other individual, we can probably thank Congressman Stokes, more than any other American, for having that kind of roadmap for us. that's what we all can easily go by, look at. His voting record is outstanding, of course. I don't know anybody else who gets virtually 100% ratings from the AFL-CIO, the Teamsters, all the labor organizations, and he gets the same rating from the Sierra Club and all of the serious environmental groups concerned about the quality of our water, of our land, and of our life. He gets the same kind of 100% ratings from organizations that look out for the interests of consumers to make sure that poor people aren't being ripped off. There are many politicians that I've been privileged to observe. I would say for most of them probably, they do good work, much of the time, most of the time, but whenever an issue comes up, you wait to see what side they're going to be on before you praise them. With the Stokes brothers, let's say any time an issue came up, you only looked to see what side the people's interest was on, and you knew where they stood. There never was anything. I guess the most important thing I'd like to say about Congressman Stokes is that no matter how much adulation he has throughout the world, throughout the nation, the Wall Street Journal, incidentally, last November, described him as probably the calmest and one of the most highly respected, best-liked members of the entire Congress, and that's on both sides of the aisle. When the Wall Street Journal said conservative ranks up despite all of this, the greatest thing I think about both Carl and Lou Stokes is that they always remembered, they never forgot. They never saw a contradiction between performing on the world stage and being at home where they came from. And that's why I think it is the most important thing for the Fairfax Foundation and for Karamu House to give this presentation. There probably is not a greater friend, more sincere friend in Congress, in the country, for these organizations than Congressman Stokes. And so I just want to thank you for allowing me to make these remarks.